Hello, people. Thank you once again for listening to the Quetzal Talk, the scary version. My name is Louis.
And this is Daniel here. And we have a very special guest today. We have Mr. Ken Hudnall. How are you doing, Ken? Hello?
Yes.
Hi, Ken. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm just having a fun time.
Yeah, thanks for being on our show, Ken. Really excited to have you so we could talk about El Paso's scary stories and the tunnels here.
Well, El Paso is the most haunted city in the country.
Oh, yeah, man. Do you think that's because it's been around for so long? Like almost like 400 years?
Well, you have to remember, there have been people here for over 10,000 years. And this was a place of religious ceremony for a lot of Native American tribes.
Oh, for real? Like they would hold like a bunch of tribes would get together and perform like I guess rituals and everything?
Yes.
Huh. And do we have any evidence of what type of rituals they would do?
Don't have that. I do know some of the locations. One place was where El Paso High School sits.
Huh.
Well,
El Paso High School is the most haunted city in the country. I mean, the most haunted place in El Paso.
And what was before where El Paso High is at? What was there before that?
Well, you just said it was a religious ceremony. Like they held religious ceremonies for the natives.
Oh, okay. So there was. Oh, okay. My bad.
If you're talking about structures, nothing.
Oh, there was no structures. Oh, okay, cool.
It was basically the edge of the city.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then was it chosen specifically because like ceremonies were performed there, or was it just because it was a good location?
It was a good location, and it was the first building built to be a high school in El Paso.
Nice. And before then, it was
From
just...
memory, I want to say it was done...
Oh, no, go ahead. Sorry about that.
It was the first public high school. The actual El Paso High School was the name given to the first public high school. And that actually started in 1885 on the second floor of Central School.
Oh, okay.
And then, they built this building that opened in 1916.
Oh, damn.
Man. And then is it true that it was used to...
So it's a very old building.
Yeah, and is it true it was used to hold bodies during like World War I or something like that?
Well, during the Spanish flu epidemic, there were so many bodies that they couldn't hold them all at the morgue, so they put them in the tunnels underneath El Paso High School.
Oh,
and I'm told the same thing was done after one of the World Wars. I wandered through some of those tunnels. Of course, I didn't see any signs, and they didn't leave any of the bodies behind. But there's many, many stories about odd things in the tunnels underneath the city.
Okay. Have you visited these tunnels?
Oh, yeah. I've been in them a number of times. There's about 900 miles of them.
900 miles?
If you know how to do it, you can go out to Horizon City, up into the Franklins.
Oh, damn.
There's a cavern underneath the state of New Mexico that the Aztecs used to use. And some of the tunnels go there. And, of course, they go down into Juarez.
So some of these tunnels have been used since prehistoric times. Like some of these tunnels have been around since before colonial times?
Well, a lot of them started out as, most cities like El Paso use what were called steam tunnels for getting utilities to various locations. Some of the tunnels were pre-existing, and they were just found and modified. And then when we went to the electrical setup we have now, they quit using the steam tunnels. But the tunnels are still there. In fact, I've had, when I first started doing this research, I met a lot of what they used to call themselves tunnel rats. They had been in Vietnam, and they when they got back here, They just had them descend underneath the tunnels. So they started exploring. Some of the first were found by accident, because most of the old buildings downtown have sub-basements that even the owners don't know about. And those sub-basements give way into the tunnel system.
Oh, like they're hidden compartments or hidden doors that hide them, or how do they not know about them?
There's a building downtown that used to be, giving an example, there's a building downtown that used to be a shoe store. And I did a talk at El Paso, in fact, at El Paso High. And a young man came up and said his father used to be the manager of the shoe store. And his job was to go in and clean every afternoon and, restock the shoes. And one afternoon he didn't want to do it, and his father made him, and he said, I was jerking that push broom. And they only had one broom. He said, if I could break the handle, then I would have to sweep. And instead of breaking the handle, it knocked open a hidden door in the basement, which is where they stored the shoes. He said there was an old staircase that went down to a sub-basement, and from the sub-basement, an underground El Paso. Now, I told that story when I was speaking to a group at the Camino Real, and there were two men sitting at the table, very old men. I thought they were dead, frankly. But they just had their eyes closed. And when I told that, one of them opened one eye and looked at the other and said, didn't that used to be your building? And he said, yeah. And he's right about the sub-basement. He's right about the staircase. He's right about the entrance to the tunnel system. But he didn't know the half of it. So I said, well, tell me the half I don't know. And he said, go find out for yourself.
Oh, shit.
So there's a lot of people who know about them. They just don't use them.
Mm-hmm. And are they still in use now? Because we talked to Chuck DeBroder and asked him if we knew about the tunnels. And he said that he had a friend, right, that says that they're still in use, or what did he say?
Yeah, that one of his friends in, I guess, the Kern Place area had a basement, and then one time they had to block it off because they kept on seeing people going through or wandering into their basement.
That's not surprising. I've heard a number of stories along those lines. In fact, Pancho Villa, according to the story I heard, had a brother or cousin or something who moved over here, and he bought a house off of Piedras. Mm-hmm. And the fast forward to about 10 years ago, we used to go to estate sales all the time. And I was at one estate sale, and you could only 2 or 3 at a time could come in. So we were sitting on the front porch talking. And one guy said that his friend was a contractor, had been brought in to see about modernizing the basement. Mm-hmm. And he said that he was going through and he's tapping on the walls, and he discovered one area that sounded hollow. So the owner who was with him said, well, pull down that drywall and let's see what's behind him. And it was a door.
Oh, shoot.
And he pulled down the drywall, opened the door, and there was a room that had been closed off and hidden. And there was a trap door in the floor, and along the back wall were chests stacked up. Now, the legend had always been that Villa hid a lot of money in El Paso in case he had to run.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the belief was that the brother or cousin or whatever he was had hidden a lot of it in the house, and then he died without telling anybody. Villa was assassinated along with his bodyguards on the way back from town to his rancho outside of Palomas. Mm-hmm. And so the money was just left. But that trap door in the floor supposedly gave way to the tunnels that run off. I had a friend who used to tell me stories about wandering those tunnels at night. And he said in that area along Piedras, if you knew how to do it, you could get into the tunnels and go all the way up to to the Franklins. So I have no doubt the tunnels are there. I have been in sections of them. I don't know anybody who has been in all of them.
Huh. And which sections have you been in? Do you know some of the main entrances?
Well, I do. I know some of them, not all of them. I know some of them. And I was asked by, I forget which mayor, who was having a discussion with me about the tunnels. He said, well, whatever you do, because he knew I do my own radio show. He said, don't say where the entrances are because we'll have people all underneath the city. And there are folks who live down there.
Folks who live down
there. Yeah, in fact, there used to be Chinese who lived underneath El Paso to the late 1970s. And some of the photographs I've seen of some of the living locations were every bit as ornate as anything you'd find above ground. And they hooked into the underground electrical cables, so they had power and water and everything else. In fact, they had an informal representative on the city council for a long time. I knew his son. And he said his father used to go down and meet with him periodically. There used to be a building off of Texas, I think it was. And in the basement was a main entrance to the tunnel system that went to the Chinese city. And the building is gone. I've been down there trying to find that entrance. But underneath the railroad yard is where the main part of the Chinese city is. And I'm told that certain sections of it are still used by people who live underneath the city.
Damn. And the government allows this? Like, is this legal that people live under there? Or?
Well, basically, they tend to ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
If you know, as I say, if you know how to get into the tunnels. Now, I had one of the tunnel rats tell me he's going to take me on a tour.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, whatever you do, come armed.
Oh, shit.
So I had a 45.
Mm-hmm.
And we went down in there, and he was going to take me to Horizon City underneath the ground, which was a hell of a walk, of course.
Right.
And he got lost. We wound up on a hill on the other side of Juarez looking back at the U.S. border, and we're both armed.
Oh, man.
Which is not a good place to be.
Yeah, definitely.
So we came back. Now, have you heard the stories about people who go up to Mount Cristo Rey being robbed?
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Well, the people who do the robbing come out of the tunnels. There are tunnel entrances on Mount Cristo Rey.
And there's
a number of caves that, if you know how to navigate them, does the Border Patrol know?
Yeah.
According to, I stopped she wound up being the chief of the local Border Patrol. I met her in a parking lot, and I told her I was researching the tunnels for a book, and would she mind if I went down in them? And she said, well, that was fine with her. And then she told somebody else, and I get a call from Homeland Security asking me would I have lunch with them.
Oh, sorry about that. 1 second.
And so I did. We were at the L&J Cafe.
Right.
And she said that she wanted to know about the tunnels. And I said, what are you going to do if I tell you? And she said, we're going to block them up.
Oh, damn.
I said, then I'm not going to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
But there are sections they do know about. They found one section that had what amounted to a barracks and a game room that somebody had set up.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't admit they ever found anybody, but they certainly gave me quite a spiel about what they had discovered.
Damn.
Now, I had one of the maintenance people at UTEP, just to give you an idea how widespread they are.
Mm-hmm.
He said when they did the resodding years and years ago, it looked beautiful and green except for one spot on the 50-yard line that was about 6 feet across, and the grass kept dying.
Mm-hmm.
And they couldn't figure out what was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And they brought in experts from all over. And he said, we had one expert who said, well, yeah, clearly you're dealing with an underground hot spring and yada, yada, yada. And he said, about that time, the ground kind of pushed up, like they had pressure underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
And as they're standing there watching it, the sod flips back, and 3 people crawl out of a tunnel and go running down the 50-yard line, heading for the gate.
What the hell?
Oh, there are tunnels all over this city.
That is nuts. Let me ask you something. Like around where Mesa and Crosby is, there's like this. It looks like a garage that's built into like a hill, and it's broken. It's all messed up. Is that like some type of entrance to those tunnels?
Well, let me give you an example. Texas Avenue,
Mm-hmm.
where there's a law firm on one corner, or a big building that's got a lot of attorneys in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then on down the street, there used to be a place that made Old El Paso,
Mm-hmm.
chili and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to the owner who also owned the building across the street.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about, ghosts and things like that. And he said, Texas Avenue that you see today is not the Texas Avenue of like the 1880s.
Mm-hmm.
He said it used to be a lot lower. And I said, well, what caused the change? He said, the floods. That's why you have, there used to be Stormville up on top of where you got Scenic Drive.
Mm-hmm.
People used to move up there during the flood season.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, the building you see across the street is actually the second floor.
Hmm.
He said the first floor was a stable, and it's still down there.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
And he said if you go down there, there's a door that opens, if you can get it open, and it gives way to a tunnel that runs down toward Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And he said they sealed it up to keep people from getting in there, but they do anyways. A lot of the buildings along Texas have entrances to the tunnel system.
Hmm.
Oh, man.
That is crazy, man. That's nuts.
Now, I had a friend who prided himself on discovering secrets.
Mm-hmm.
And his wife used to appear on my radio show when I was on Standard Broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I got into a discussion with one of the people about the tunnels. And after the show was over, he came over and he said, look, I'm going to tell you where one of the tunnel entrances is. He said, me and some friends of mine, we got into it. And he said, the stories about Villa hiding gold are true. Because we found some of it.
You found some of it?
And I said, oh. Yeah, he said, we found some gold ingots that Villa, they thought it was Villa, but they didn't know for sure, had hidden.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, why are you working? He said, well, there were 5 of us, and if you find a hidden treasure, it's kind of like Fight Club. The first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The first rule of finding hidden treasures, you don't talk about hidden treasure. And one of his friends bragged about how brilliant he was at finding these gold ingots. And one day there's a knock on the door, and it's the FBI. Come to confiscate the gold.
What?
And they also sealed up the entrance to the tunnel. It's in the sub-basement of a very prominent building downtown. And I went to check to see if I could get into the sub basement, and I couldn't.
So, are there a lot of prominent buildings downtown El Paso that had entrances to the tunnel system?
About 50% of them, is from what I'm told.
The public library is one of them.
In fact, to give you an idea, in the early 1900s, Mr. Tellez was the historical preservation officer of El Paso. I didn't know we had one, but apparently we did in those days. And he said you couldn't do work downtown without finding one of the hidden Chinese opium dens. There's a lot of them underneath the city. And they found one that it had newspapers from the 1890s. And you know, if the opium dens are down there, Lord knows what's underneath this city.
Right. But how can they get food down there and all that? That's what I'm tripping out on, the people that live under the city.
Well, that's not hard. You come above ground, you go to the grocery store, and you go home.
True. Damn, that's
there was when I first wrote the first book, which is called History and Mystery of El Paso del Norte. The person that wrote it with me was Connie Wang, and she was giving me a tour of all the bizarreness in town. And she introduced me to a gentleman who owned one of the big houses across there from UTEP. And he said some people came to see him one day.
Right.
And the young lady that came to see him knocked on the door. Another young lady opened it. They had a very nice conversation. And before he came out of his kitchen. Now, the young lady she'd been talking with went upstairs about the time he got to where the living room where they're at. And he said, "Oh, I didn't know you were here. How'd you get in?" And she said, "Well, that young lady with the blonde hair let me in." What young lady? The young lady that I've been sitting here talking to for 20 minutes. He says, "I live here by myself." Well, she just went upstairs. And he went tearing upstairs. Of course, he couldn't find anybody. And then they got to talking about the house. It had been rumors that it had been haunted for years and years and years. And in the basement, when they went to renovate it, and he said, I very seldom tell anybody about this. But he told her, and then she told me. And he said, we discovered the basement was actually bigger than what we thought it was. And on one side, we found a room. And in the floor of that room was an entrance to a tunnel. And there were some beds and some mattresses and old clothes. And he said when people would be smuggled into the city. Now, at one point in time, there was what was called the Chinese Exclusion Act, where Chinese were forbidden to be in this country.
Right.
It's supposed to be a temporary measure, but it lasted until 1943. So they would sneak into the city, and they'd be put in what we'll call waste stations, where they would wait for to be smuggled further north. They would tunnel into your basement, because a lot of the old houses had basements.
Right.
And they didn't want to steal from you. They would seal off that part of the basement with a wall, and then they would use it as a waste station.
What?
So there's a lot of them in that area. Now, are you familiar with what's called the Turtle House?
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. I saw a little documentary online that talked about it.
Well, you'll find one done by me on YouTube.
Oh, nice.
And in the tunnels underneath the Turtle House, you'll see a big opening that's been bricked up. If you manage to get through that brick, there's a tunnel there that runs all the way into Mexico.
Yeah, and is it true that
I mean, there are
there's
tunnels all
another
over the city.
turtle house in Juarez that it connects to?
There's one just like it on the other side, according to the story. I have not been to the other side.
Wow. Ooh, that's intense, man. And then also, I had another question concerning the cities. We had talked to JJ Arms, and he had told us that the military had taken him to like an underground city. And is that connected, or is that different than the underground tunnels?
Well, there's an underground city under the railroad yard that I told you about that was built with the Chinese.
Correct.
There are places underneath Fort Bliss that I managed to get into without realizing I was underneath Fort Bliss. I mean, let's face it, there are no street signs underneath the city.
Right.
Now, the problem is, we think of tunnels as, lights and air's moving and all this. No, it's dirty. There are rats the size of chihuahuas. There's no air moving. When you get in there, you just kind of hope you're going to find an exit.
Right. And have you ever found...
Which isn't always the case.
Yeah, so you've gotten into dead ends before and pretty tricky, tight spots?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The guy who was giving me the tour, he was trying to take me up toward the Franklins, but as I said, we wound up in Juarez. But there were dead ends. There were places where the dirt had collapsed. I forget the name of the street, but one of the buildings during one of the big storms collapsed. And it collapsed because the tunnel underneath it flooded out.
Oh, shit.
So the ground gave way. And one of the building walls collapsed.
Damn.
I mean, these were not done by engineers. These were done by people who were looking for, to get into this country or to, find ways to escape.
Right.
The Aztecs used to talk about the Aztec underground. Well, there's a lot of stories. The Aztec underground is a cavern underneath New Mexico you get to through a tunnel in the Franklins.
What?
Now, the problem is when you get down in there, let's say you got a flashlight and your batteries die, you're screwed. I assure you, you're screwed.
Yeah. And do you know of anyone that's ever gone into those tunnels, the Aztec tunnels?
Well, one gentleman led me to understand he had, but he had nothing to prove it.
Oh,
and I've learned, a lot of folks have a lot of stories, but do they have proof?
True.
A lot of things we're told as history really aren't true. And there's evidence of one of them right here in El Paso. When Pershing went chasing Pancho Villa.
Right.
We all know about the Pershing house where he lived out at Fort Bliss. And the assumption is that Pershing was the commander at Fort Bliss. No, he was not the commander at Fort Bliss. His duty was to get ready to go into Mexico. This was going to be a method of testing new equipment such as cars and motorcycles and airplanes. There is a lot that I've read that makes it clear that Villa was actually paid $50,000 in gold to attack Columbus, New Mexico.
What?
When I was at Fort Benning, I was chief of academic records. And, from the moment I hit the door to the moment I left, people are on top of me. So I used to go hide in the cage in the library, which was a locked facility. And I'd sit there and read all the stuff. Well, a major and a lieutenant were sent to take the money to Villa. It was gold. He did not want paper money. He didn't want a check. He wanted gold coins. Well, the major and the lieutenant vanished and Villa attacked. So the assumption was that they completed the mission and then he killed them. Because he used to do that. So nobody would know what he had.
Yeah.
And if you go into the Pershing house, it used to be the picture was behind the door. You'd see a picture of Pershing and Villa sitting on the front porch of the Pershing house. They were best friends.
What?
When Pershing's wife and family were killed at the Presidio during the fire, the first one to show up to give him condolences was Pancho Villa.
Wow,
and I met when I first got to El Paso, I met a man who was, he had to be in his 80s at the time. He said as a 16-year-old, he had lied about his age to get in the military, and he had been Pershing's Batman when they went to the field. He rode with Pershing into Mexico. And he said in the evening, Villa would come down with his officers, and they'd all play cards until dawn. And Villa go back up in the hills, and chase would start again. The whole thing was a game. In fact, the unit I was with in one of the units in South America had been with Pershing, and there was a photographic record of everything. And I found it. And one of the pictures showed Pershing, his officers, and Villa and some of his officers sitting at a card table. Now, at the time I found it, I didn't know what it meant until this guy told me.
Right. Man, that's intense, man.
So
history is
there's a lot of stuff that we're told that is just not true.
Right. So would you consider Pershing going to Mexico and Villa attacking Columbus, would that be kind of like a false flag that event just to give an excuse to go into Mexico?
Yes, exactly a false flag. He was sent to attack in order for us to have an excuse to go into Mexico and test all our new equipment, because we knew we were going to get involved in World War One. And how would we use trucks and motorcycles and all this other stuff that we now had?
Yeah. And so these incidences have been happening even before the creation of like the CIA and those other organizations.
Oh, yeah. Have you ever heard of Operation Northwood?
No, I'm not too familiar with that.
That was a formalization. Of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in 1962 of the use of false flag operations. They wanted to use it to go into Cuba, and Kennedy said no. They were going to shoot our own troops, shoot down our own planes, sink our own ships. In fact, I wrote a book. I've got 80 some odd books out there. I wrote about that.
All right. I have one of your books. Someone lent me one of your books, The Secrets to El Paso, I think it's called. And in it, you talk about the tunnel system.
History Mystic El Paso del Norte. I've written 7 about El Paso. There's a lot to write about here. And I could probably write a couple of more with the stuff I've collected.
Oh, yeah, man. I bet there's a lot of history, and you're telling us a lot of crazy history already.
Oh, yeah. You have no idea. When you tell folks you're writing a book, they'll let you go places you never should be allowed to go and do things you never should be allowed to do. And I've gone places looking back, I never should have gone. Now, explore the entire tunnel system. Nobody's got a lifetime long enough. 900 miles in the dark. Yeah. That's a lot of distance to cover.
Hell yeah, man.
But you go, what used to be the library out in Horizon City was one end of the tunnel system. Now, I didn't know it at the time I went there, because when they were closing it down, they were selling the books, and that's why I went. But I've got most of that library upstairs. But the history of that area, I didn't know. In fact, I still only know parts of it.
And is it kind of a messed up history, or is it just something that's just very curious?
Well, it's not messed up as much as a lot of players in El Paso lived in Horizon City or that area around there.
Like players, like people that were involved in the, I guess, the business aspects of the city and the political aspects.
Yeah. The politics in El Paso has always been a real dirty game.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, it's always been kind of the Wild West out here. And is it still, would you consider it still
Of course
kind
it
of
has.
dirty?
I didn't know what politics and dirty tricks were until I started writing books. I've had people pretend to be me. For 20 years, I did ghost tours every Saturday night.
Right.
And I'm finding out that I'm still doing them. And I haven't done one this year.
Wait, what? So someone's out there in El Paso right now taking tours?
Are pretending to be me.
Wow, that's kind of creepy.
And they're not me. Isn't it though?
Wow, people are weird. People are strange, I guess. That's creepy, man. Sorry,
well, there was one guy who used to be here. He and his wife, he lost his job. And I was told when I started doing ghost tours in 1999 that nobody would ever pay me a dime to be told about the ghost of El Paso.
Right.
And then he came to laugh at me for that first. I used to do them on Saturday night, and he came to laugh at me, and I had the lobby of the Camino Real full. And I also used to do them out at the cemetery. And the woman that says she owns the cemetery came to me and she said, "You need to give me all the money you make here because it's only right."
What?
And I said, "Maybe for you, but not for me." And so she got with this guy, gave him a copy of one of my books, said, "Memorize that. You're going to go in the ghost tour business." And he and his wife used to wander around. She was a psychic, and she could tell you what the folks in the graves were thinking. And it was just silly
Ridiculousness.
And she used to fall on the graves and wail. And
oh man, she made a spectacle out of it.
Oh, you could have sold tickets, but he used to tell people about a ghost horse that came out of the crypt underneath the Bassett building and runs up and down Mesa. I've been in that crypt. I didn't find the horse, no horse bones, no nothing. What I tell you in the books and I tell you in the ghost tours when I do them is based on history and a lot of research.
Well, that's good, man.
But, his philosophy was, if I lie, who's going to know? Well,
that's ugly.
Somebody who's researched the history knows.
Right. And then
I have dealt with every crook you could imagine. I never would have known anything about this had I not started doing the ghost tours and writing the books.
Right. And has anyone tried to sue you?
And then I got a call. No.
Oh, that's good.
And I've always said, if you want to sue, come on. But if I get sued, I counterclaim.
Right.
So you're going to be defending yourself too. And the question is, if what I write is historic or accurate, what is the basis for your suit?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly, man. Well, that's good. And then in terms of the politics here in El Paso, like we were talking about how dirty it is, I mean, back in the day when El Paso was first founded, did Masonry or any of those secret organizations have anything to do with the layout of the city or anything like that?
With the layout, not that I've been able to find out. Were they active? Yes. To give you an idea, at one point in time, you couldn't get elected to public office if you weren't a member of the KKK.
Damn. And that's why there's a bunch of high schools and schools in El Paso that have a bunch of like Confederate or I guess generals that aren't pro-Mexican, I guess.
Well, yeah. You have to keep in mind that the people that settled El Paso came from all over. And at one point in time, the Confederacy controlled El Paso. They captured Fort Bliss.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a varied history. We've probably had either 5 or 6 flags that flew over this town. I mean, that's one of the reasons for the tunnels was all the smuggling that went on. And it's not just here. The same is true in Las Cruces.
The tunnels go all the way over there?
Well, there are tunnels there.
Mm-hmm.
There's one building across from the high school. In fact, I almost bought it. It was a very nice house.
Mm-hmm.
But the basement had a tunnel that went underneath the street to the building across the street, and they would smuggle stuff in and bring it into that house through the tunnels. You find that a lot. In fact, every major city I know about has tunnels.
Oh, shit.
Because it was a good way to smuggle stuff in.
Mm-hmm. And what about
and don't let anybody tell you that crime doesn't pay, because it half the fortunes in this town are based on criminal activity.
Right.
Like some of the older families you're talking about, like they got their wealth from, I guess, criminal.
Well, you have no idea. There's a book called Dirty Dealings. If you want to know about that, get that book and read it.
All right, cool. Dirty. And did you write that, or did someone else write that?
I did not write it. No, I would like to have, but I didn't. Two of the prominent families bought up every copy they could find and set fire to them.
Oh man.
There might be 15 or 20 copies still remaining in existence. I found one of them. And then somebody gave me one as a gift. So it makes fascinating reading.
Yeah, I'll definitely try to look for that.
So, let me ask you, do you know if the guy Henry Trost, was he not a Mason?
There are rumors. I've never bothered to confirm it. He built the, what's it called? The building he built that used to have Sylvester Reyes' office in it. I don't remember. Since I quit doing the ghost tours every Saturday night, I'm not downtown as much as I used to be.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the front of it, you'll see faces in the facade.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all the Cortez building. All of them are Cortez except one.
Mm-hmm.
And that one is actually Trost face.
Oh, shit.
The basement of that building is supposed to have an entrance to the tunnel system.
And you talk about the building that's kind of right across the street from the San Jacinto Plaza?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Damn, yeah, I've seen that building in those faces. It's pretty weird.
It used to be a hotel at one time. In fact, John Kennedy stayed there when he came to El Paso. And it is a haunted building. If you read History and Mystery of El Paso del Norte, there's a lot of stories about hauntings in that building.
And since you do these ghost tours, what have you seen that's been like one of the most spookiest things in El Paso that you've experienced? Not heard of.
Well, I did a tour in fact, I was invited by the security to come go through the smelter.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, what time tomorrow do you want me? My show was from 9 to 11 in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
I said, what time do you want me to be there tomorrow? And they said, no, come now.
Oh, shit. Mm-hmm.
So I went out there with the guest that I had. In fact, the guest I had that night happened to be a paranormal group.
Mm-hmm.
So I went in. The head of security took me into this one building, and which is empty, except for one folding chair. He said, sit there. I'll be back in an hour.
Mm-hmm.
About 15 minutes after he left, I started hearing people walking on the concrete. I heard machines start up. I heard voices.
Oh,
Nobody
shit.
there but me. In the powerhouse, there was one of the generators exploded, as I remember, and it took the leg off a guy who actually died laying in one corner.
Mm-hmm.
And we went into that building, and we heard what sounded like moans. We never found anybody, but it was coming from the corner where the guy supposedly died.
Right down. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's pretty intense.
How about that hostel? I think it's a hostel that's right there where Pizza Joint is downtown. That old ass, I guess, looks like a hotel
Is
with.
it Gardner?
You're talking about Hotel Dew? You're talking about the one on the. It's a rent by the week hotel.
Yeah, in Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There used to be Hotel Dew downtown. That's now been torn down.
Mm-hmm.
That was run by Catholic nuns. But there's a lot of little rent by the week or the month hotels on some of the different streets. There's a lot of stories about those. In fact, a couple of them deal with some Hollywood murder mysteries.
Oh shit! Really?
Like some actress or actor got murdered here in El
There was
Paso?
actress. In fact, I forget the movie. The star was Kirk Douglas. Back in those days, if a starlet got in trouble, they used to go to Tijuana for abortions,
Mm-hmm.
but the media found out about it, so they started flying them here so they could go to Juarez.
Mm-hmm.
And a black limo would pull up in front of the hotel, and the young lady would get in and go to Juarez and theoretically come back in a day or so, and she'd be fine. Well, this one particular young lady got in the limo, was never seen again.
Mm-hmm.
The story is that the abortion was a failure and she died. And the purported father was said to have been a star on that particular film.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen a full investigation of that. I mean, that's just like the Patterson mystery, where the Patterson family disappeared.
All right.
A lot of mysteries in El Paso.
I was going to ask about the Patterson house and everything. About
I don't know. Sorry, I don't know nothing about the Pattersons. Can you go ahead and give me a little rundown on that, please? Because I don't know.
Okay, the guy, Mr. Patterson, started out as a street photographer.
Mm-hmm.
He'd walk up to people and say, "I'll take your picture for $2 or whatever."
Mm-hmm.
Well, he opened what became Arts Photographs
Mm-hmm.
down on Montana.
Mm-hmm.
And he and his wife were doing well. In fact, he ordered a brand new Cadillac and paid for it and never came to pick it up. He and his wife both disappeared. There was a handwritten letter that said, "Give everything I have to Art." Now, Art worked for him at the store.
Mm-hmm.
They never found out what happened to he or his wife. The house was said to be haunted. A number of people who tried to live there said Miss Patterson would walk into the master bedroom and get into bed.
Oh, shit.
And is it true that there's some tunnels
I had somebody tell me that well, the story that I got from somebody who says he was one of the last people to deal with Patterson. Have you ever heard of, what's the name of it? Let me look at my list here. There is a lost treasure, and I don't remember the name of the treasure, but it's supposed to be a cave on White Sands. And supposedly the Apaches, I think, they knew that the white man loved gold, so everything they stole, they brought there.
Mm-hmm.
And the I don't see it on my list, but I know I've researched it several times. Anyway, supposedly Patterson discovered it, and he went to start bringing stuff out and was never seen again. A number of people have known about it. Been a lot of deaths related to it. Mm-hmm. And as far as anybody, there is one story that President Johnson authorized the use of that treasure to fund some of his operations in Vietnam.
Oh, damn. Shit.
So that someone had found that treasure and then used it to fund the war?
Yes, and the military excavated it since it was on white sands.
Mm-hmm. Damn, so it's a pretty good amount of treasure there then, huh?
Well, there's a number of treasures in and around El Paso. Years ago, my wife and I knew a lady who owned an antique shop. Mm-hmm. And we went by there one afternoon, and she was looking kind of frazzled, and we stopped to talk to her. And she said, "I want to give you a gift." I said, "Well, okay, fine." Because I'd always buy treasure hunting magazines, because I've been an amateur treasure hunter for 50 years. Mm-hmm. And she handed me a book. And she said, it was an old book. And I said, "Well, thank you. I don't know I'd ever read the book." But she said, "Well, I'm not giving it to you for the book." She said her brother used to wander the hills. And he found a hidden treasure. And he never had to work a day in his life, but he always had plenty of money. And he handed her that book one day, and he said, "If something happens to me, this is your fortune." Well, she never could break the code in the book. Mm-hmm. And he disappeared up in the hills one day. But according to what he told her, there were treasures there dating back to the days of the Spanish infestation, if you want to call it, of this area.
Right, yeah.
And he would bring out only what he needed to, take care of his, pressing needs.
Is there any housing around there now?
No, it's still desolate hills. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of little out of the way places you never guess are worth looking at. Like there's an old it's where people went to relax, and it's up in the hills, and you have to Dripping Springs, the sanatorium. My wife just walked in and said, "Oh, that's Dripping Springs."
Oh, nice.
Mm-hmm. It used to be a tuberculosis sanatorium, but it's I'm told up in the hills it's got, there's a lot more than they see in the park. It's supposed to be gold hidden up there. But as I say, there's an unbelievable amount of lost treasure in this area if you just knew where to look. And some of it is said to be hidden in the tunnels. That I told you about the guy and his friends who found the ingots hidden by Pancho Villa. Yeah, he ran his mouth. One of his friends ran his mouth. The FBI came and took it.
Yeah.
And back to the tunnels, I wanted to go ahead and ask. since you say, a lot of these tunnels were used by Chinese people, and I know that there's like a historic Chinatown downtown where you could still see like Chinese facades in front of the buildings. Do you know if there's any connection to those tunnels in that area?
That I don't know. I know there is a Chinese city underneath the railroad yard, but I don't know what the connection is to the Chinatown downtown. El Paso's Chinatown began at right near the Plaza Hotel, went 5 blocks west, 5 blocks north. I mean, it was a 5 block area. But used to be, once the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed, nothing they had was safe anymore.
Right.
So that's why they went underground. It was even worse in Mexico because they also had a Chinese Exclusion Act, and they used to take everything they had and take them to the border at gunpoint and force them across. And of course, we'd arrest them and deport them back to Mexico, and this would just go on. Some of the material I've read is just absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, that sounds pretty.
And their only crime was being ostracized by the powers that be.
Right. So, I mean, these people that are still under the city living are still Chinese descent people, or?
No, most of them underneath the city are homeless.
Okay.
It is dry under there. And if they know how to hook into the power lines, they got electricity. And I'm sure they've hooked into the water system, so they have water.
So there's like a huge population that we don't even know about, that most of the Pasoans don't even realize is there.
I don't think anybody knows how many are there. I know.
And is it convenient?
I ran into a bunch of them when I was wandering around, but for every one I saw, there was probably 50 I didn't, because I wasn't looking for them. I was looking to see where the tunnels went.
That's pretty crazy. That's just intense. So you wouldn't recommend for people to try to go and sneak into these tunnels because they're dangerous?
No. I'm very dangerous.
That's crazy. That's pretty scary.
Now keep in mind what animals we have here and what animals live underground. I would not want to run into let's just say a rattlesnake in the dark.
Oh, that's a good point.
Because remember, there are no lights down there.
Right.
And you're limited to the size of the tunnel. And they were built for much smaller people than we are.
Yeah.
And remember, smugglers also still use them.
Right.
That's crazy, though. I mean, can't they get blocked off? I mean, if it's causing a national security threat.
Everyone they find, they block. But if there's 900 miles, how many entrances and exits do you think it has?
Right. Yeah. Do you think
that old shoe store? Just is. I was down there a couple of years ago. It's still sitting empty.
Yeah.
Think of how many buildings are in El Paso that nobody goes in.
Right, especially
downtown.
Yeah, downtown too. Damn, that's crazy. And how about, because I heard that there's like also an entrance to those tunnels in the downtown public library. Have you ever tried to go in through there?
I have not. I wrote about the library when I was writing about haunted buildings because the older part is quite haunted. There are, and keep in mind, there are a number of stories that may or may not be true. To give you an example, there are tunnels in New York City and the second and third generation families live underneath the city. And one of the entrances used to be behind the picture of Christ in the main public library.
What?
Well, when people started asking about it, they suddenly had a fire.
Wow.
And the picture of Christ was taken out. So you know what they did is they sealed off the entrance.
And a little bit of I want to ask for your opinion off topic of El Paso. Have you heard of the Denver airport?
Yes, I have.
What do you think about that airport? I mean,
Which was built at a place. It was built at a place that did need an airport. It's outside of Denver, and there are many, many stories that I have been told about tunnels underneath that airport.
Right.
And if you look at some of the paintings and artwork in the airport, it's definitely sending a message. I just don't think anybody knows what the message is.
Yeah, it's pretty frightening, some of those images. Some like Nazi figures, skeleton Nazi figures with swords, and then dead animals.
Killing Quetzales.
Yeah.
Yep.
The Quetzal died.
That's crazy.
Whoever did the artwork was on drugs when they did it, I think.
Yeah, and then what about the Lucifer, or that horse that killed the guy that was working on it, the actual artist? Is that true?
No, I haven't heard that story.
Yeah, supposedly that big horse that they have in front of it, the main sculpture, I guess, when he was working on it, he got killed. I don't know if by the horse or if he just died by some other accident, but I heard it was connected.
Yeah, the head fell on him. The head of the statue fell on him or something.
Well, keep in mind that for every event, there's probably 15 stories.
True.
Oh, that's a good point.
Well, I mean, I've been to that airport and I've seen those pictures. And, well, first of all, you have to take subways to get anywhere, like trains to get anywhere in that airport. And and then outside, when you're walking out, there's this big, I guess, Mason stone that says that it was built by the Masons. Yeah, and I heard stories too that they're connected, like it's in the middle of the nation because it's it's easier for rich people to own land there and to reach any part of the country. And supposedly there's like bunkers under there, like all these millionaires living under there. I don't know how true that is, but
well, keep in mind that this country at one point in time had a lot of missile silos, and a lot of those have been turned into very ornate apartments for those that can afford to pay the freight.
Right. Yeah.
A situation like with the pandemic, I know a lot of people who took out for hiding places they created out in the hinterland. How many of those stories are true and how many of them aren't? You know, again, you come back to who knows.
Right.
When I did my show, which I started in California 30 some odd years ago, I had a young lady who told me that her father, there's an underground city, and her father was the ambassador to the UN from the underground city. What? And I'm thinking to myself, yeah. And she said, there's a high-speed subway that runs from Los Angeles to Washington and New York City. I'm going, yeah, I've heard that. She said, you don't believe me? And I said, to be perfectly frank, no. She said, okay, right now, and she looked at her watch and she said, let's just take a time. She said, it's 1 o'clock. I said, okay. She said, I will call you from New York City at 2 o'clock. Now, unless she took the Concorde, she couldn't get to New York City by 3 o'clock.
Right.
So I said, okay, fine. So 3 o'clock rolls around, my phone rings, and it's her. And it was a New York number. And she said, I'm in New York City. I took the high-speed subway.
Damn.
And I said, okay. So I called No, I used a reverse directory on that phone number.
Mm-hmm.
And the phone number was it's a deli, and I've been there, and I can't think what it's called. Got great hot dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And the reverse directory showed me that phone number came from that deli in New York City, 2 blocks from the UM.
Oh, shit.
Oh, damn.
Now, and that was before all this computer faking phone numbers.
Right.
And so, is there a high-speed subway running from LA to New York? I wouldn't put money against it.
Right. Well,
I've investigated too many things and found too many things. It's hard to believe not to discount anything.
Right. Well, recently we did a podcast with JJ Arms, and we asked him about aliens, right? If he believed in aliens, and he straight up said, "No, I don't believe in aliens." And then he's all like, "But there is an underground city under El Paso, and I've been there. Like when he was a mayor or city council, I forgot what he said he was, that he got taken down there by some military personnel, and he says that they're real. That there is I guess what it's called a deep underground military base, and he says that he's been there.
There's a lot of those around the country, and one of the biggest posts in the country is now Fort Bliss. So if they're going to have one, it's going to probably be here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I remember when I found Omar Bradley's bumper flag in one of the underground places I was exploring, and I gave it to one of the generals. He said, "Where did you find this?" I said, "Underneath Fort Bliss." He said, "Don't you ever tell anybody how you got there."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Okay." So clearly there's something down there.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That they don't really want anybody to know about.
Mm-hmm. And then, like, also, I think, like, Area 51 and stuff like that, if they really wanted it to be secret, why is it so public? It's like they want everyone to go there. You know what I mean? Like, it's like they're pushing everyone.
Well, it's not that. It's the fact that when things get out, what do you do?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I've got a video, if I ever get it, take the time to sit down and do some tweaking to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's called The Secrets of Dulcie. Now, if you know anything about the Dulcie, the little town of Dulcie, which is on the Jicarilla Reservation, it said there's an underground alien base there at Dulcie. And when I heard that, it was like, yeah, okay, fine, sure. So I decided one weekend, one of the hereditary war chiefs invited me to come as his guest, so I went.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to be introduced to the weird, go to Dulcie. Some of the stories that people told me, people known for their veracity, there's a lot of weird things out in Dulcie, and there is a base underneath Archibald Mesa. Now, did I see any aliens? No.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a lot of people tell me they'd had contact with them.
Damn.
And everybody that told me that certainly was not crazy.
Did they give kind
A
of
couple
the
of them
same
I
description?
did have doubts about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And also, I don't know if you know about this, but right, I keep telling everyone, but I think the New York Times already printed some story that admitting that the Air Force actually has seen, what do they call them, out of this world aircraft over there by the Pacific coast, I think over by San Diego. They see these aircraft that look like Tic Tacs, I guess they call them. And they're just these aircraft that have no heat signature coming out of them. They're just traveling using some type of gravity time bending. They don't know what it is, but the Air Force already admitted to that they do see these things.
The Air Force has finally admitted that there are craft in our atmosphere that we don't know who built them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I used to speak at Roswell before politics reared its ugly head in the book writing field.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things that we were finding were absolutely bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
Also, keep in mind that the reason the Army Air Corps shut down all the Roswell discussion was because with 1947, we're the most powerful country in the world, and we couldn't deal with whatever was flying in our atmosphere.
Right. Yeah.
Now, I've seen photographs of, in fact, I was in Rachel, Nevada. And a plane came over that made absolutely no sound. And the person that owned the little alien said, "Oh, we see these things all the time." When the stealth was unveiled, the people in Rachel had been seeing it for 3 years before that.
Damn. Shit, dude. That's crazy.
Okay. And so what about in the Franklin? I've also read sometimes that people see like weird ships or weird things rising from the Franklin Mountains. What do you know about that?
Oh, yeah. I've written about a lot of UFOs in and around El Paso. You'll find them in discussions in almost every book that I've written about El Paso.
Okay. And has there been like
We've got
history of them? Like since colonial times, or is it just a recent phenomenon?
Well, 1897, you got the Aurora crash. 1972, you got a crash in right across the border that's never been talked about. In fact, when the Aurora crash took place, there was a military representative on the spot almost immediately because he had been assigned to that town because of all the weird things that had been seen. Oh, when you start delving into the history of that area, that'll blow your mind.
And are you talking about Aurora, Colorado? Or
no, I'm talking about Aurora, Texas.
Oh, I didn't even. Sorry about that. Aurora, Texas.
Yeah, where is that at? I don't even know where Aurora is.
We did a TV series, which hasn't started running yet, but it's called Beyond Roswell. You know, everybody thinks Roswell is the end-all, be-all of UFO crashes. It's not. It's one of many. And Aurora, Texas, you had something hit a water tower on a judge's ranch and knock it down. And the pilot was supposedly buried in the churchyard. Had a nice little marker put up by the people. Well, the marker was stolen, and then the body was stolen. And all the stuff from the UFO that was dumped in the well, the well turned out to be highly radioactive.
Shit.
But they can't find no more of the debris, I guess. But the well is still radioactive?
No, because, it happened in 1897.
Oh, okay.
Now, you are aware of all the mystery airships that were seen across the country back in those days. They used to land at people's farms and send people on stupid errands. And then they'd go flying off.
But how'd you hear about these encounters? Or I never even heard about that.
Research. Look up mystery airships.
Mystery airships.
They were in the late 1800s.
Damn.
Mm-hmm.
And
And if we ever get beyond Roswell on the air, we researched a lot of stuff.
Damn, dude,
It's also there's a lot of information to take in. You really do have a lot of well of information and good research.
Well, I've been doing it for 55 years.
Oh man, that's cool. So you really dedicated your life to trying to find the truth about our area, I guess.
I mean, are you familiar with the zone of silence?
I've heard something like that. It's close by, right?
No, I don't know what that is. What is it?
Yeah. We have had UFOs. We've had missiles launched from White Sands go off course and land there. And whenever there's an asteroid shower or meteor shower, they'll hit in the zone of silence.
Yeah.
What is the zone of silence?
And the UFO crash that took place just south of us crashed because it hit a plane that took off from El Paso International Airport.
Oh shit! Damn. So the zone of silence is basically this place where all your electricity shuts down and your compasses don't work no more, and there's no sound.
You cross the line into that area. You can't get cell phone. You can't get radio. You can't get anything.
And how many miles from here?
Now,
is
the
that?
Mexican government has put a research station in it, and some folks that went down there, they said chasing UFOs, they had car trouble. And while they're trying to figure out what the problem was, two long blonde-haired people come walking out of the desert, fix their car. They get in the car and drive off and look in the rearview mirror, and there's nobody there.
Oh shit! That's crazy. But isn't that caused by the atomic bomb or something like that?
Nobody knows why the zone of silence took place, because the atomic bomb was at the Trinity site on White Sands.
That's weird. And also compasses don't work there, huh? They go haywire there.
No, they spin.
Yeah. And I think clocks too, right?
Yep.
I'm still confused. So where exactly is this? Is this in Mexico? Is this in New Mexico? Is it in Texas?
Chihuahua. In Chihuahua.
Yeah, I've heard about.
Look up the zone of silence on the internet.
Okay.
Yeah, that's always a weird phenomenon to hear about, and to know that no one knows why it's happening. That's pretty crazy.
Nobody knows why, and there's no way to find out. And yes, I did.
And have you talked to any like paleontologists like from Mexico, like that Mausan guy? I don't know if you heard of him.
No, I've not heard of him.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's this really popular guy from Mexico that talks about aliens and all that, but I guess he doesn't focus on El Paso much. But well, damn. Anything else, man?
No, I mean, Ken, you've given us a lot of information and a lot of information to process, and thank you very much for having this interview, man.
No, you're quite welcome. What do you get my bill?
Right.
Right.
Hey, I was gonna ask you, Ken. So you say you have your own podcast?
Yeah.
What is it called?
Go to KenHudnall.com and you'll see. I've done 700 and some odd podcasts.
Oh shit!
And if you go to KenHudnall.com, at the bottom of the page, you'll see links to many of them.
All right. And
if you'll be so kind, when you process this and get it ready for broadcast, if you will send it to me, I'll post it on my podcast as well.
We sure will do that.
Fucking do that, man.
Hell yeah! People want to hear this.
We've got we've got about 7 million listeners worldwide.
Oh shit! Hell yeah! Nah, it's pretty damn interesting, dude. Like, it's one of the best podcasts I've actually done. It's pretty crazy. That's cool. But and are you on any social media that you wanna go ahead and let people know, or just your website?
Well, we have a Facebook page. In fact, we got 3 of them. One is for Borderland Radio Network. One is for El Paso Ghost Tours, and then there's a Veterans Practical Primer. I told you how to get your benefits in that book.
Mm-hmm,
But if you'll send it to me at my email is ken@kenhudnall.com.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, we'll go ahead and
we'll definitely do that, and we'll put make sure to post it on our website as too, on Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook. Okay. Cool. Well, we want to go ahead and thank you for giving us the time and the information and the lovely conversation. It's been, like we said, very interesting and
eye-opening.
Hell yeah, man! It's pretty nice. And what are your plans for Halloween, man?
For Halloween, I've got my sandbags in place. We're going to sit and wait for the zombie apocalypse. I used to do a ghost stories at Fort Bliss, but this COVID thing has kind of put a stop to everything.
Right? Yeah.
Are you going to do that on? Would you do that online?
Well, I guess I would, but if somebody wanted me to, do my ghost stories online.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, they're.
And you did do it online on Channel 9.
Yeah, Channel 9 had me walking around the Camino Real telling stories.
Mm-hmm.
You can find that on my YouTube channel.
Okay. And your YouTube channel's your name, Ken Hudnall?
The channel is Ken Hudnall Show. SHOW.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
Well, thank you.
You'll see my Turtle House tour and my El Paso City of Secrets, and also the one that Channel 9 did.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you actually went to the Turtle House too?
No, they didn't. I filmed it myself when I was there.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's crazy.
They let me wander around underneath, and I don't think they do that anymore, but they let me go. As I say, when you're writing a book, you can go places you shouldn't go and do things you shouldn't do.
Hey, that's cool, man.
Yeah, I saw the documentary of that too, and they saw how they would put those railroad track things for supports under the Turtle House.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but the thing that fascinated me was that archway.
Oh, shit.
That was bricked up.
Right, yeah. And then there's like skylights, huh?
And the ghost tour at El Paso High, I actually created, and they took it over and said it'd be a great fundraiser for the Alumni Association.
That's crazy.
And do they still do those ghost tours in El Paso High, or no, not anymore?
If they do, I don't know anything about them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this year I have done very little.
Right.
Yeah, because the whole COVID.
I've contracted pulmonary disease with lung scarring, so I don't do all that anymore.
Right. Damn, man. Well, hopefully you get better with that. And anything else you want to go ahead and share with us before we go?
Oh, I could talk for another couple of hours, but as my wife says, call back in a couple of weeks and we'll do part 2.
Hey, we would love to do that. I wouldn't mind.
Cool.
Or maybe one day you could invite us to your podcast so you could teach us a little bit more too.
Sounds good.
Cool. Well, thank you. Like I said, Ken, thank you for your time, your information, and we hope to do a part 2 with you.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll definitely check out
your
show.
Right. Well, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for listening to the Quetzal Talk podcast. This has been the scary edition, and hope you come back to us for the next podcast. Thank you so much, and thank you, Ken.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.